yeah. I love my HBCU. And boy, I love it, I love it, I love my HBCU. And man, I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. Yeah, man. I hope my team they won one. I hope my team they won one. I tune into the HBCU Sports Lab to see if my team won or lost. If they lost, I'm quiet as a mouse. But if they won, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Dr. Cavil, he know what he be talking about. Mike and Charles, they know what they be talking about. They compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they won or lost, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, yes sir.
This is Dr. Cavil with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. As you see, Mike Washington is still out on assignment, but I got Professor Drew and Professor Bishop always in the house representing. We're going to get straight into it today. So welcome to episode 239 of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab radio show and podcast. The show that's covering the sporting HBCU diaspora, all things HBCU sports from the institutions large and small, from NAIA to the NCAA. We share insights and information on the HBCU sports culture, HBCU athletic aesthetics to facilitate the story of HBCU athletic programs in the business of HBCU sports. I'm your host, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, along with my co-host, Mike Washington, Charles Bishop. We're filming from our home studios and sending a signal live to KCOH 1230 AM studios with the Texas Radio Hall of Famer, Ralph Cooper, in the beautiful home of Texas Southern University from Houston, Texas. Today's episode of Inside the HBCU Sports Lab is sponsored by THG Agency, LLC. THG Agency is a company that provides sporting and educational consulting and data analytics. Man, I got myself a hold of some information. I want to play it at the top of the show because I'm interested in your thoughts. But before I do that, I would be remiss if I didn't say hello to the lab lecture listeners. And we'll get into it. And Charles Bishop, Professor Bishop, how are you doing today?
Doing well, Dr. Cavil. We got a lot of great action coming this weekend. My eyes will be on New Orleans. We got the Legacy Bowl. We got baseball getting ready to jump off this weekend. Of course, a lot of basketball action. So a lot of stuff going on in and around HBCU sports.
Yeah, and people don't realize I saw you a little early today. Got a chance to see you in action doing the interview. Well done.
Thank you.
Those in the Houston area, KCOH, I should say, 11. Have Professor Bishop on there talking a little information about what I'm calling the prime effect. We'll see how that goes. So check it out. We'll see if we can get it to the people. May not be releasing it next week, but Professor Bishop did his thing. With that, how you doing, Professor Drew? No problem.
Haven't got about 15 minutes of fame like Professor Bishop over there, but other than that,
we just Drew, you gonna get yours. We're just waiting for you to get into the program. See, he got a little head start on you. He's into the doctoral program, and you know what they say. Has it, represents it, has its privileges at times.
Look, I ain't mad at him. I'm glad I do him win before it gets too big for him and everything. Before he forget about us little folk.
Cut it out.
No doubt.
But seriously, got the text 10 minutes ago. Doc called me before I was getting ready to walk out the house. But anytime Dr. Cavil called, if I can do it, I will be there.
Man, I appreciate that. That's what you call professor in action, man. Clinical professor.
Just remember that when I turn in this next assignment, my brother, because
that's right. You do something like that, you deserve a little more time. On One Star Recruits podcast with Rip and DK, Coach Eddie George states on the OVC on that show that the OVC is, well, hold up. Y'all might not believe if I said. Let's just play it. Go check out One Star Recruits and you can see the entire interview. But we're going to give you a little clip. I mean, this is really powerful information that Coach Eddie George, he was very transparent in many different ways about this interview. And let's see what you think about it. Let's get our producers and let's go ahead and play the clip. Let's play it now.
To play the 2022 Southern Heritage Classic. It seems like it might be the final one, which is a total bummer. Can you and Deion Sanders sit down and break some bread and figure this out in Memphis to keep this thing going?
Well, we've talked. He shared some things with me that made his people uncomfortable about the current arrangement. This arrangement has been in existence before we got here. He has a unique vision for where he wants Jackson State to go, and so do I. I get it. I'm a businessman, so is he. And when you look at the impact that he's had from an attendance standpoint and being a draw, you get it. You want to have transparency with where every dollar goes. Make sure it's going to the right people at the right time. So I completely understand what he's talking about. And for the foreseeable future, it might be the best thing for this thing to take a pause and let it flesh out and restructure the deal in a very unique way. We're going into a different time and age. I think, for us, now I can speak for Tennessee State, we are seeking to go to a conference that has some more stability. The OVC has, it's a dying conference at this point in time. But hopefully we can continue to stay. Hopefully the leadership of the OVC can continue to add teams. But at some point, we're going to have to think that our future, say what's best for the future for Tennessee State. And
Man, dying conference.
Wow.
That's
Woo!
powerful.
What do you do by Ric Flair?
Let me level set a little. He said, we talked, meaning Coach Deion Prime Sanders of Jackson State and Coach Eddie George of Tennessee State. Coach Prime shared things with him. When he says him, we're talking about Coach George. It made him and his people uncomfortable. This arrangement would be put in place before we got here. It was already in place, he said. He has a unique vision, speaking of Coach Prime, for where he would like to see Jackson State's program go. And so do I, and that is Coach Eddie George in terms of where he thinks Tennessee State should go. I'm a businessman, and so is he, especially considering the impact. There should be transparency with every dollar goes out with the right people at the right time. For the seeable future, it might be the best thing for this thing to take a pause, for it to flush out and restructure the deal in a very unique way. For us, Tennessee State is looking to go into the conference with more stability. What is best for Tennessee State to find stability? We can always create opportunities within the infrastructure. After this year starts, we may look later down the line and we can reconvene and bring it back later down the line. There was a lot of powerful remarks there that I'm not sure that a lot of people were ready for, because obviously a lot of this has been focused on Jackson State.
Yeah.
Ashley Robinson, the president at Jackson State, President Hudson, right? Coach Prime, the fans of Jackson State. To some degree, they even put Commissioner Dr. Charles McCullin of SWAC in there. Obviously, we had the letter from Tennessee State. Really hadn't heard anything from the athletic director of Tennessee State. And until now, we hadn't heard anything from the coach. But boy, when Coach Eddie George decided to speak, you talking about dropping the mic, he certainly did that. Again, that interview was courtesy of On One Star Recruit podcast with Rip and DK. I think they're on most platforms. So you type in our recruits, there's a lot more in that interview, and you can go check it out after the show, obviously. But with that being said, let me go to you, Charles.
Okay.
What did you get out of that?
Okay, let's separate out two things here. He talked about the Southern Heritage Classic. Maybe we need to cool this thing, restructure it. But the big thing that I took out of that was the OVC being a dying conference. And Dr. Gill, as we talk about conference churning, never stops. The wheels got to spinning in my head. Whoa, that made me sit up in the bed when we talked about, what Tennessee State looks at with regards to the OVC. So now this opens up the possibility, for me at least, where is Tennessee State looking at going? I mean, is that a possibility now that you've come to the realization that the Ohio Valley Conference might not be the best fit for Tennessee State? So let the speculation begin, whether it's BAC, SWAC, whatever the case might be.
Yeah, we know that it's probably not the Big South. We'll talk about that a little later.
There's another dime.
Yeah, maybe the Sun.
Throw Missouri Valley in there.
Yeah, that's an option.
Yeah.
In terms of that, Southland maybe. They seem to be one structure away from not dying, but not many choices out there. But hey, you do have the SWAC. We didn't say the SWAC. SWAC may be an option.
So
I don't want to act like that there.
But let me ask this quick question, Doc. Is it feasible now for our schools to look at the independent route, or is that a dead model?
No, that is not feasible. You don't even have any independent programs right now.
Correct. Mm-hmm.
And the reason that's not feasible because conferences are not allowing you to stack your Olympic sports, probably your basketball sports in the conference, meaning you may have a chance to win the tournament and get the basketball money, but then you're not bringing your pride and joy, the football revenue associated. People are not making those kind of deals.
Sure.
Even if you think about Notre Dame, which has the television deal, they have strong programs. And so all the other programs are with the ACC. But even in that matchup, they play 2 or 3 games. They play several games with ACC.
I think it's 5.
And 5 of them.
5.
That's right. 5 of them. Thank you. That they play with them. And even in that, the contract says if they ever decide to give up independent, ACC is the first home that they go to. So you just don't see these independent deals coming along. So good question there. Let me go to you, Professor Drew. What came to mind when you heard this?
There's a lot to dissect here.
And think about that. That was only a minute and a half.
Right.
I mean, that was like at least a thesis defense. Not quite a dissertation defense, but in that minute and a half, you heard the opening arguments for somebody's thesis, to use an academic analogy.
Absolutely.
So the first thing I had before I even dissect what was said is, and I have to ask this question. Are the president and the head coach on the same page? Because when you think back to the letter that came out after with Jackson State announcement, the legal, however you want to phrase it, these statements that Eddie George made almost are contrary to the spirit of the letter that came out. Because if Tennessee State was seeing the same thing that Jackson State was seeing and was looking at possibly doing the same things that Jackson State did not do, allegedly was trying to do, however you want to phrase it, this seems contrary because I don't think that letter would have been so stern and so rebuking of Jackson State's action if this is the tone that is at Tennessee State. Now, maybe they didn't take a look at this stuff seriously until Jackson State made their move first. And they went back and like, oh, damn. They are right down there in Mississippi. Some is fishy in Denmark, as they say. That's the first, before I even dissect the comments that Eddie George made, that's the first thing that came to my mind, Doc.
I like that. That's pretty good. And to your point, I'm gonna shout out Brian, and that's Brian and AD of the Sports Wrap show. First of all, condolence to him and his family. But I like when he gets into the show that you all do on Sunday, oftentimes he's like, let's break this down, time and sequence. So to your point, the question that kind of comes to mind is, when did Coach Prime and Coach George talk? He said they talked, but obviously he didn't say when they talked. They could have talked a couple of days ago. They could have talked prior to the letter. They could have talked prior to Jackson State making their move. I would assume it's probably latter, to your point, that afterwards, maybe he gained a lot more information. I do think it's interesting if you listen to more of that interview. He talks in great graces and great terms of his president. So I think the relationship is strong there. So it'd be interesting that if this came later, that he sat down and talked with her and let her know a bigger picture. And then maybe she sees about going in a different direction.
Yeah.
You've heard some Tennessee State folks say out there that they are looking at conference affiliation in terms of what that may look like, as we say, conference churning. So it's fascinating in so many different ways of what this goes on. But I think it's evident that in terms of Coach Eddie George, that he has his desire, and his desire is not to remain in the OVC.
Yeah.
That is quite evident.
Yeah.
And so we'll remain, this story continues to go on. But I'm interested next in terms of what Coach Prime may say in terms of his position, since Eddie George has discussed that they have been open dialogue and have talked. And Coach Prime is not one that's shy about his opinion. So it'll be interesting if he feels the need to provide some additional information in regards to where he continues to see Jackson State going, what they may mean to Tennessee State and his friend, Coach Eddie George. They've been very up. Everybody's saying that Eddie George leaned on Coach Prime very early on when he was making the decision to take that job. So these are folks that, colleagues, friends, talk.
Business acumen, businessmen.
Said that quite clearly. Sounded like Jay-Z. Man, I'm a businessman, not a business. I was like, oh, man, holding folks. So, it's serious. But let's take this break. We can get into that maybe a little more. We'll come back after this break. We have another story about conference churning. We'll get in that just a little bit, touch on that, and then we'll get into some of the mixes and see maybe some other news you want to get out there. We'll push on to that a little bit. I started opening the show with the lab jacket, but I was like, this is so hot and heavy. I'll just play it and we'll be in the lab regardless. So maybe we'll do the lab jacket, at least show you a little bit more later. But let's take this break. We'll be right back after this break.
It's never too early to plant the seed, to share the tradition, and instill a sense of pride in your HBCU with your little ones. HBCU Pride and Joy Children's Boutique helps you share your school spirit with a wide selection of adorable kids apparel and accessories officially licensed from your favorite HBCU. Visit hbcupridejoy.com and follow us on all social media at HBCU Pride Joy on Facebook and Twitter.
The Cavil Group is a Florida-based marketing and training consulting firm. We help businesses communicate to their target audience and engage them in conversation. We also help to expand their audiences, which will ultimately result in growth for those organizations. In addition to being a certified constant contact specialist, my colleagues and I are also certified in John Maxwell Leadership Principles. We use these proven principles to conduct workshops, training, and private coaching sessions for individuals and companies looking to take things to the next level. Contact us to schedule a free consultation. Issues today, don't delay, call Cavil.
It's NBA TV, and baby, the swag is back. Florida A&M Rattlers, Texas Southern Tigers. Where you
Compress the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they want a lot, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Cavil. We're inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Professor Bishop and Professor Drew. I think there were some more thoughts that you may want to pin on that, Professor Drew. Before we do that, I did want to stay with this. G. Boom Holly asked the question, who's running the show, coaches or ADs? I think that's a good question. I would suggest that if you're not careful, that's an old way of thinking, that there is this true hierarchy in terms of, line of demarcation and who answers to. I would suggest in learning organizations, while you may have different designations of people that sign off on different documents, in terms of that hierarchy, good organizations, everybody talks. They share information. They share thoughts. So if we're not careful, we get this confused thought that that you have to answer to the chief or whatever, and that you have to be in line about that. But depending on the type of organization, just because you have independent thought doesn't necessarily mean that you're not in line with your organization or where they're going. And I would say that you have a poor organization if they're just sheep, meaning that everybody just toes the line and falls in one direction, where there isn't true discourse in terms of public opinion of what you think on a situation that influences you for sure. And so I think it depends on what type of organization it is going on. So I think you have to be careful when you just throw out these little sound bites in terms of, you know, who is running this or whatever, and what does that look like, versus factually, because you're giving a point of clarity for what your thoughts are. Because the question was asked, what are your thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
Versus what is the university's thoughts? Go ahead, Drew. What did you want to add to this?
Going along with the thing G. Boom Holly just said, you know, in the case of these two coaches, you just happen to have two successful businessmen who happen to be football coaches and happen to be good football coaches. So they're bringing their business sense to the boardroom in addition to their football sense to the locker room. First of all, but the one thing the first statement that stuck out with me with Coach George's thesis there that he gave was transparency with every dollar, right people, right time. And then I think he probably left two omissions out of it. How about the right amount and the right platform? You know, are they getting paid with $3 bills out of this SWAC, out of this Southern Heritage Classic? You know, it makes you kind of wonder if they're getting paid with $3 bills there. That's number one. And number two, has anybody ever seen the Southern Heritage Classic on TV, YouTube, any streaming platform? Maybe like Coach George said, the Southern Heritage Classic needs to take a step back and evolve into 2022. Because it seems like the Southern Heritage Classic, this has been one of my biggest gripes with the Southern Heritage Classic as an HBCU sports fan. Unless I drive to Memphis and buy a ticket, I cannot see it.
That's not the promoter
in any
model.
way, shape, or how. And that is a problem in 2022.
Oh, that is a great point when you talk about that.
Huge.
And Charles, you said that traditionally is not the promoter model. You see that in some ways with the State Fair Classic. That's been kind of issue burning with a lot of folks there. You know, 2 years ago, you had that classic game between Grambling and Prairie View during the COVID spring season. It was not televised. You literally had folks watching a cell phone videotaping of the game, and it was getting huge hits. People were actually cash apping the lady, thanking her for giving them visual representation. And it was a grainy, unprofessional shot, but people were so seeking the information. To your question, Professor Drew, it hasn't been televised, streamed, whatever you want to call it, very often. I know a couple of times it was on Fox Sports 1 over the last decade, maybe. This year, it was actually on ESPN.
I'll be happy with a tape
live. But I can tell you now that was a major consternation that ESPN had to jump through hoops to get that done, with a lot of people getting literally called names for even considering having it done. And this is based on working with the promoter. And this is not to necessarily throw dirt on him, but I'm just giving you facts that have been shared with me in terms from multiple sources. I'm talking about from a media perspective. This is not just one person telling me. This is several people that are in high executive level positions that tried to make this happen, having major headache to get that done, to get it broadcast, which brings me back to your point that even though it's been seldom, the fact that it's been so seldom and so hard is the point that you're making. And in this current environment, that is a major issue. You're exactly right.
Because that revenue stream is probably more important than ticket sales if done right.
Correct.
Yeah, I think you're seeing a business model that is the equivalent of a VHS tape. I mean, it's becoming obsolete. I mean, we have moved into a streaming sort of world. So,
no doubt about it. Let's move on a little bit to another conference chain. Churning, as we like to say. HBCU Game Day was out with the news. North Carolina asked for approval by its board to move to the CAA, the Colonial Athletic Association. If you recall, Hampton recently did this. North Carolina A&T has an invite to join the Colonial Athletic Association and leave the Big South Conference after less than 2 years. Again, this is courtesy of HBCU Game Day, the Big South era of it. North Carolina A&T, before it gets started, is coming to an abrupt end. A&T Director of Athletics, Earl Hilton, recommended that the school accept an invite to move to the Big South, the Colonial Associations. Hilton stated that the invitation came unexpected and unsolicited. That's quote. Last November, the proposed move to the CAA comes just over 2 years after the same board approved the move to the Big South from the MEAC, where A&T had been a founding member for 50 years prior. The move officially took place at that time, July 1st, 2021. 24 months later, it is seeking a new home after Monmouth and Hampton University bolted for the CAA, leaving the Big South with just 5 football programs, which means that their automatic bid to the FCS playoffs is in jeopardy. Now the Big South is the 4, but it brings up the question. Many people told you that the issue was with travel. They say that the CAA is talking about breaking up in divisions, but it's spread out similar to the MEAC. So with all due respect, it's very intriguing about what is going on with A&T in their athletic programs. Obviously, as the Director of Athletics, Earl Hilton, and the board, they know much more than I know. But this looks like it's all over the place. But with that being said, wishing them the best. Still a HBCU, so we're going to cover them. But this is a fascinating piece of news in terms of things changing, conference churning, as I like to call it from an academic perspective. It's wild. It's wild. 80 Drew, any thoughts?
Oh, y'all coffee drinkers, fellas?
Of course.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Tea, hot tea, though.
Okay, coffee, hot tea. This stay by North Carolina A&T in the Big South is the equivalent to my morning coffee. It's going straight through me. And that's what it seems like this stay in the Big South is. It's going straight through North Carolina A&T. Will this move occur in July 2022, which means they will have literally spent 1 year in the Big South? That's question number one. And I mean, when you think about it, especially with Kennesaw State going over to the ASUN, where does this leave, the Big South? If I'm A&T, I'm gone.
In terms of football, they're in major.
Yeah.
Major
if I'm A&T, I'm gone. It's just like that cup of coffee I drink every morning. An hour later, I'm gone. And that's what this is. It's an hour later, and they need to go ahead and make that move and go to the CAA and let the Big South do what it does. The question is, does the Big South try to raid the MEAC or other conferences? Because we see they've already tried to raid the MEAC once before. And raid is such a bad
I think you're
word.
Right. It's obvious that they're going to try to raid the MEAC, but I think sometimes we have to be careful because it's like, what gives the Big South that much more power with 4 teams that the MEAC is going to be like, yeah, we want to go over there where y'all struggling to keep people. It's more likely that the MEAC, if it has desire, that it can raid, if you want to use that word, the Big South for those 4 teams. I don't see the vice versa because the MEAC, I mean, let's be frank with this because sometimes we get lost what everybody else wants to say about this. But the MEAC is in a much stronger position other than us seeing Big South as white ice, and because they're white conference, that by definition they're better. They have 4 teams.
You said
MEAC had 6. And let me get this straight though, because this is important. The MEAC in terms of football doesn't even need 6 teams for automatic qualifier because they go to the Celebration Bowl. So the magic number 6 doesn't even mean that much to the MEAC. But even if that's the case, it's still in a stronger position. It's the CAA. They would need 2 teams just to be in a position to maintain automatic bid if that's what you want to do. And that's not given if somebody else leaves. So you could have MEAC theoretically, if we're not careful, 2 teams can go to the Big South. And before they even sign the paperwork, you could have another Big South team leaving and you went to a conference that's still dying. It doesn't make sense.
So if I'm an A&T or Hampton fan, my question is, you got me all on board for this Big South move 2 years ago. Where was the strategic forecasting or the strategic planning that you did not see this conference evolve to where now you're looking for somewhere else to go? So that's
for Hampton when they rushed over there. But that's a great question. You can't say there was any forecasting in terms of that model. The leadership did not see that. They failed in that. If we're going to be frank about that. Now, they may try to shine it in something else, and they may say that our whole goal was to make these moves, but you don't make these sudden moves this fast because the whole world turned and flipped on a dime. And so you may say that's causal effect in terms of what's taking place there, but you can't say there was a strategic plan for that. There's no way that you're going to have somebody that studies this or that has a decent amount of sense to say that. And I'm not saying that you still didn't necessarily make the right decision, at least now, but to suggest that you had a strategic plan on what took place, nah, you're not going to get anybody with some sense to buy that.
Right.
And correct me if I'm wrong, North Alabama is staying around for one more year before they move up to FCS, or are they already gone?
They're gone. North Alabama is going to the Atlantic Sun.
Okay.
Kennesaw State is in Atlantic Sun. In fact, those teams, other sports are already playing in the Atlantic Sun.
Right.
And they're in their last year of transition. So they would qualify. So the Big South, the Atlantic Sun is closer because they have 5 teams. And Jacksonville State is playing one more year at the FCS level. So they will have 6 teams to have an automatic bid to the FCS playoffs this fall. But it's more likely that a Big South team will probably go to the Atlantic Sun in terms of maintaining the bid than they are of trying to stay in the Big South. So that's why I said the Big South is in major trouble because they don't have the foundation to recruit anybody with any real substance to make them feel like that somebody else is not going to head out of Dodge before they sign the paperwork. Come over there.
So when we come back on the other side of this break, I have a question to ask because I'm curious about the allure of going to the Colonial Athletic Conference.
No doubt. Let's take this break and we'll be right back and follow up with that question.
Supermarket sushi, really?
No. Wait, Troy, you work here?
I'm never not working. Like Head & Shoulders Scalp Shield technology, up to 100% dandruff protection, even between washes.
Never not working, huh?
Oh, Troy, you're such a good teacher.
Yeah, I know. Never not working. Never not working. Never ever not working.
Are you serious?
Never not working. Dandruff protection that's never not working. Head & Shoulders Scalp Shield technology.
From novice to aficionado, find yourself here. High quality cigars plus personal customer service. Slow Burn is Waco's only mobile cigar lounge, featuring a meticulous, curated collection of premium cigars. Visit our website, www.slowburnwaco.com. That's www.slowburnwaco.com.
Are you hungry for authentic Caribbean food? Like jerk chicken, oxtail, red snapper, shrimp, tofu, and rasta pasta? Well, find your way over to Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta.
Them belly full, but we hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, open daily from 11 a.m. to 10 p.m. And on Friday and Saturday, we're open till 4 a.m. Come to Mango's and put some spice in your life.
So we've got a good thing going.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, 180 Auburn Avenue, right next to Royal Peacock in downtown Atlanta. For more info or directions, call 404-698-3992 or log on to mangoscaribbeanrestaurant.com. For instant coupons, text MANGOS to 313131.
Tell your mama hungry, papa hungry, brother hungry.
Mango's Caribbean Restaurant, authentic Caribbean cuisines.
Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna law, and who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson.
This is Dr. Ville with Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. We're gonna get into some basketball. We promised you that. We will get into that talk, but now the talk and the question is about this conference churning and what may happen, what is out there. We got folks going back to the 16 teams SWAC. Oh my God, Michael Ford says. And obviously, I'm going to have to pull out my article I wrote 20 years ago, literally, that talked about a 16-member SWAC. But that's a whole different framework. And that was a conference that was split between FBS and FCS, but all basketball was 16 members. So talking about foresight, as you said, Charles, if you do your homework, you can see where things are going. From that perspective. And I think Drew asked the question out there, who is Tennessee State's partner? For me, I know a lot of people may challenge this in terms of where Clark Atlanta is. It's interesting with the move they made last week in terms of Coach Slaughter.
Later.
For me, the move is to get into the Atlanta market, to partner with Clark Atlanta. There's multiple things that go on there. That means now you have two private institutions, so you cannot have Bethune-Cookman by itself. They happen to be close in vicinity, so you can help in terms of the rivalry that can be bookend there. Obviously, it allows you to float east and complete the geographic map of 7 teams in that division versus 17 in the other. And so I think there's a lot of synergy there. It bookends Houston, Atlanta.
Yeah.
2 major metropolitan markets. In terms of what that looks like. And you talking about corporate dollars and the synergy you have between those two. It really gives you that framework, the radio markets that are associated with those two teams. And so, for a lot of reasons, and my good friend, Commissioner Moore is going to jump me on this, but, I do it from consulting, working on a project that looks at him, looking at even growing the SIC to a 16 format that may even get into the Caribbean. So those things are still a framework for him. But that's who I would say that you look to partner with and work with them as they need to move from Division II to Division I FCS level. But you need to take advantage of that Atlanta market. With that being said, I think, Charles, you had a question that you wanted to ask as we came out of here.
Real quickly, the $1 million question for me is, what is the allure of the CAA for North Carolina A&T and Hampton to go from the Big South to this other conference that you mentioned where the I guess when you take a look at it, are there any sort of geographic rivals that are built into for both schools or whatever the case might be? And it goes back to the fan question. Will the fans follow you? Did they follow you to the Big South? Or will they now, do we look at them continue to follow, and going to the CAA?
Yes, and I'll answer this question because Roy has a good one down here. So I'm going to compartmentalize the question because I think there's some synergy between the two. And I'm going to start with his first. He says, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, I have a simple question. Has anyone at the MEAC asked A&T to come back, or has A&T looked at going back since travel was one of the biggest reasons they left? Are we dealing with an ego issue? Because when you look at these conferences, they are not that much higher than the MEAC. Perfect where I was set up for your question. I have had a chance to talk with the leadership of the MEAC, multiple ADs, commissioner for that fact, and it has been an open invitation. Serious about A&T if they had a desire to come back. And Hampton, for that matter, they don't have a desire to come back. And I think this is a type of thing when leadership decides they're going to float the ship and go in a different direction. They're all on board. So they're not really looking back. Whether you call it ego, whether you call it strategic planning, whether you call it forecasting of what they see the future is going in, they're all in with those chips. They cash those chips in and they're all in. Now, in terms of the CAA, for Hampton, I think it's different than for North Carolina A&T. And I think this is where we have to be careful and be serious about if we're going to do the analysis of why teams leave and what may be the allure. For Hampton, it was a presidential decision with Dr. Harvey. He's made that very clear when he first moved Hampton from Division II to the FCS, that he had a desire himself and has sold that to everybody in the board and those that are with him in terms of his desire. It was for Hampton to get in the CAA. He's talked about the academic prestige that he believes it will bring. Obviously, the strength of the CAA, especially when he first talked about the move, there was no question that the CAA was a very strong conference. It was one of the strongest out there. And that was both in football and basketball. But since then, if you're going to be honest and say, yes, it was, that it's not strong at all compared to where it was in basketball. You know, teams like George Mason, BCU have left. James Madison is leaving for the FBS. So teams that won FCS championships consistently and played well has gone. Teams that have won multiple layers into the basketball NCAA tournament, they've left. So that conference, as alluding to Roy talks about, is not as strong. The Big South never made sense to me in terms of the strong or academically. But then again, it was sold as reducing travel for the student athletes that had some concerns, or part of that was to reduce the budget load associated with that travel. That's different than what you see now. But I think the move now for North Carolina A&T is because they didn't understand the calculation that you asked of the ships and chips changing. They are moving out because now they don't want to be left behind in terms of that conference dying. And so this is an opportunity to get on a ship that they believe is stronger than a ship that is taking on water. So different rationale. I'm not sure how they'll try to sell it to whatever. But to your question of fans, I think it is a major concern if you're one in terms of the fans. A lot of our fans say that you're supposed to be all in, period. But we know that's not realistic. When you study marketing, sports marketing specifically from a marketing perspective, and what we call the escalator of fans. Fans go up and down those fans. So all the fans are not the same. You have your high level fans that are attracted to A&T, and they're going to be with A&T no matter what. Losing streaks, they were there. When they went 0 and whatever. When they take the ride, they were there. When they change different conferences, Big South, they're going to be there. When they go into CAA, they're going to be there. They're high on there. But those fans in the middle, it's going to be a little more challenging. Because some of those fans are associated with A&T with the cultural experience. And that cultural experience is not just about A&T. It was about the exchange of the cultural experience between multiple HBCUs playing together. The fact that you went to the fraternity meeting with a South Carolina State member of Alpha Phi Alpha or Omega or Sigma man out there, right? Or your sororities where you got to talk about the games of the week and the bands. That's not going to be there at the same level, although you would have fraternity members in these different chapters across the thing. But it's a unique cultural experience that connects you to that. That's not going to be there. So you're going to have some of that erode off. And then you're going to have the very base level fans that were only connected to the Black cultural experience that is associated there. So if you don't give them that, they're not going to have an interest. So the question becomes, is how many are in multiple of those groups? And there's more. I'm just simplifying for you to let you know what it means in terms of trying to understand what this may mean in terms of fans following them in their allure. It depends where they are on that
escalator. Yeah.
That escalator in terms of the marketing opponent there, right? Where are they on that is going to really answer your question. And that's why the science to this is so important when we talk about the business of sport. With that, we'll get into our last break, and we're going to come back and talk basketball. Before we get in there, I did want to talk about Grambling State's theme, Chevy Camaro, to be featured Saturday's NASCAR Cup Series. That is extremely cool in terms of what that looked like. If nothing else about the car, many of us, especially as young boys, if you would, collected the little race cars. Boy, I would have loved to have one of those race cars with the G on it at the time. It mainly what got me in trouble in terms of whether I'd been at Prairie View or not. But that's fascinating. With that being said, Alabama State released the schedule, and it's not just the schedule. All of them done that, but I want to shout out kudos to how they released the schedule in terms of sports information, one of the best in the business, of how they had alumni in these various cities and states of where they're going to be playing their games and going back and forth from home games to away games. That was uniquely done, and credit goes out to Jerome in terms of what he was able to do with that. NBA Classic, ESPN TV, February 19th. Keep your eye on that. All-Star Weekend is coming up. NBA HBCU Classic to air on February 19th. Partnership between TNT and ESPN, Wolstein Center, Cleveland State's home arena, Howard and Morgan State. That should be fascinating. Keep your eyes on that. Let's get in here and take this break, and we'll get back and talk a little bit of basketball about some big games coming on this week. It should be fascinating and interesting. Closing up on the championship regular season should be fascinating going down the street. Stick with us. We'll be right back after this break.
For 200 years, Montgomery, Alabama has been making history by people who had the courage to stand up for change. Today, this riverfront city has been reborn, embracing the past and looking forward to the future. From the National Memorial for Peace and Justice to the stage of the Alabama Shakespeare Festival, this is where history was and is made. We are proud to call Montgomery home, and together, we can be the change.
Charmin Ultra Soft has so much cushiony softness, it's hard for your family to remember. They can use less.
Sweet pillows of softness.
This is soft.
Holy Charmin. Oh, excuse me. Roll it back, everybody.
Sorry.
Charmin Ultra Soft is so cushiony soft, you'll want more. But it's so absorbent, you can use less. So it's always worth it.
Now, what did we learn about using less?
You gotta roll it back, everybody.
We all go. Why not enjoy the go with Charmin?
From novice to aficionado, find yourself here. High-quality cigars plus personal customer service with Slow Burn. Visit our website, www.slowburnwaco.com. Slow Burn is Waco's only mobile cigar lounge featuring a meticulous, curated collection of premium cigars. It's more than a mobile lounge. It's an environment and an experience rich in history, luxury, and personality. An elegant extension of any celebration occasion. It's the perfect escape and meeting place, a space where you can relax or enjoy a shared passion. Have Slow Burn plan your next big event, or before you are planning to celebrate your win over your athletic rival, you can shop our collections at www.slowburnwaco.com.
But if they want, keep tab. I'ma do the dab, yeah. Press the analytic data with your hip hop. If you know them like I know them, they gon' tell you if your team, if they wanna lose, yeah, and who the ball, who the ball. So listen to Professor, yes sir, yes, and pay attention, cause he gon' teach a lesson. Yes.
One of the games that I'm looking forward to this week, and it's unfortunate that you had that A&T Hampton game, and it wasn't on a Saturday night where you get the cloud leather. But congratulations to Hampton as they got some payback against A&T for earlier on the men's side. But the thing that's nice on Saturday, you do get the women's matchup. You get Hampton at North Carolina A&T, who are actually both teams are playing better basketball, if you would, in terms of records. Really, North Carolina A&T that's playing well in a lot of ways. 9-6 in the conference race, 12-13 overall. Hampton is just at 6-6, but 10-12 overall. Both teams are coming off loss, but this should be a fascinating matchup in terms of a Saturday contest for those two teams. let's move into the Big South. The OVC before we let you kind of pick some games that you want to have your eyes on. Ohio Valley, the women of Tennessee State are struggling now. They actually are playing SIUE, and they do have the lead 37-35. It's the end of the third. Going down the stretch should be a good one. In terms of the standings, though, they've slid a bit. They're sitting at 6-8 in the conference race, 11-14 overall. They've lost 4 straight games after, really starting off well. Took a little bump, got some games back in, but they're on a slide again. You can see that in a young team. It looks like their legs are getting behind them, a little tired in terms of what's going on. Continuing with the women's side of things, let's get into the MEAC. MEAC, in terms of matchups, what you got going on Saturday, Maryland, Eastern Shore, South Carolina State, Delaware State at North Carolina Central, Norfolk State at Coppin State, and Morgan State at Howard. Obviously, on Monday, it flips with Coppin State at Howard, Norfolk State at Morgan, Maryland, Eastern Shore, North Carolina Central, Delaware State at South Carolina State. So it'll be fascinating when you talk to some of those matchups, Norfolk State and Morgan State at the top of the conference. Norfolk State sitting at 8-1 and Morgan State at 7-2, along with Howard and Coppin State also all at 7-2. So some big matchups there in terms of what's going on. Finally, let's get into the SWAC as we know what's going on there. Number one, as we talk about Jackson State, they get it done. They're at their rival, though, so it'll be interesting to see what that looks like. Jackson State, Alcorn State on a Saturday. It's always big, but Alcorn is just frankly struggling. Just 2-18 overall. We know what Jackson State does. I'm not sure if that will be a game even after the first quarter. But it's fascinating, one that you always have to keep your eyes on. It is a rivalry game. Alabama State at interesting matchup there in terms of the vicinity between. I wonder if they get some crossover fans to get down there, even basketball. Alabama A&M at Bethune-Cookman. Texas Southern will try to bounce back after getting that tough loss for first place against Southern. Texas Southern at Valley. Grambling at Southern, the big matchup in terms of the rivalry matchup. And this is after Southern in first place. Grambling took 2 L's on the road, so they're going to want to right the ship. Both teams, in terms of winning side, are sitting at 10-14. So it'll be fascinating as the women are going to try to right the ship, I should say, as both of them lost to Texas on those road trips, both to Prairie View and Texas Southern. Prairie View at Pine Bluff in terms of what's going on there. Any thoughts quickly on any matchup that you want to think about in terms of yourself, Professor Bishop?
Morgan State women, they get a bite at the apple this weekend. Go to Howard and then play number 1 Norfolk State. So that's one that I'm going to keep an eye on when you talk about the rivalry games with Grambling and Southern, both on the men's and women's side of the ball. Looking forward to that matchup. And then I think, an intriguing one to me, at least on when we talk about the men's side, is Jackson State. They have been on a roll of late, going to Alcorn, playing their rivals. So that'll be an interesting game.
Drew, in terms of the women's, any of those games that were listed for any of the 4 Division I HBCU conference has your interest this weekend?
No, this is pretty much a taking care of business weekend, as I like to call it. The matchups really favor the teams that have been good thus far throughout the season. This is one of those weekends you don't want to slip up, looking ahead to the tournament and starting to think about seed and all that stuff. This is just one of those weekends at the end of the season when those legs are tired and the grind is harder. You just got to focus and take care of business this weekend, Doc.
Great point in terms of that. I'm typing a reply to G. Boone Holly that says he doesn't think that the Atlanta market is all that. And I think he's correct in terms of fan base. The fan base is different. Rabbit. I think you have a huge market that will be different if you put a SWAC team in there with these SWAC fan bases when you talk about how many of those large alumni bases are there. The other thing that I'm talking about that I think people need to understand, I'm talking about from a business perspective.
There you go.
I need people to understand that. You all look at wins and losses, the history of a program. I'm talking about from business in terms of media market, which is where television dollars are coming from. This is how the SEC, the Big Ten, this is how they make money. I need you all to understand that and go beyond just understanding general fan-based market. That is dead. That is a dying market. Get over it. Understand the business of sport, please. I'm talking about understanding corporate markets and where corporate markets go in terms of large cities associated with understanding TV market basis. And that's where the SWAC is going. That's where it understands the money is. And that's how they are getting and drawing capital revenue above, beyond of what they ever got before. So please change the framework, how you think, because you're thinking old school and behind. You got to change that mindset. With that being said, as we're up against it, but I thought it was important to share that because it was a good question to point, depending on how you look at it. But I wanted to be descriptive so people were clear of why I said what I said. I thought I explained that, but obviously it wasn't clear. North Carolina A&T to Campbell and Hampton at Longwood are the matchups on the men's side. Not so much really interested there as the men are in the middle of the pack and struggling really more than anything, but I thought it was fair to get that out there. In terms of the OVC, Tennessee State is hosting SIU on Thursday, and then on Saturday, they have Eastern Illinois. Obviously, Tennessee State is struggling and trying to figure out where they're going to seed themselves and make sure in the top 8 for the tournament. They're at 5-9. They're in a good position to at least make the tournament and see if maybe they can get some upsets and go a couple of rounds, or maybe make a real stunner and shock people. Obviously, we talked about the MEAC matchups. I'm fascinated on the men's side with Southern and Grambling in terms of what is going on there. But let me stick with you, Drew. On the men's side, what are a couple of matchups that stick with you in terms of that has your interest? Either OVC, Big South, MEAC, or SWAC.
Actually, I was gonna go a little bit off of that radar because, like I said, a lot of those games are kind of dud games this weekend. I just wanted to point out, Doc, that this is the last weekend in the CIAA. One more day of games in the CIAA. Go to the CIAA website, check out some of those matchups and how some wins and losses could really affect the tournament and the standings going into Baltimore. Also, the GCAC and the Southern States Conference wrap up this week also with their conference schedule. GCAC and Southern State Conference will finish up on Sunday, I do believe, that they will finish up. There's a couple of GCAC games scheduled for Monday, but GCAC is getting ready to wrap up also. Continue with the small schools, looking at some schedules, looking down at the Red River Athletic Conference, just hitting the big conferences that most of our teams are in. Red River Athletic Conference has one more week of games left, along with the SIAC. This is makeup weekend in the SIAC, and then there are games primarily either on Tuesday or Thursday in the SIAC as they get ready to wrap up their conference standings this week.
Charles,
SWAC baseball this weekend. In addition to basketball,
he didn't already turn the page. What you got baseball? What you looking at on the baseball?
Alabama State, Southern, UAPB, Jackson State, Grambling, all down there in New Orleans. I'm keeping an eye on those games to see who, get a little early litmus test, see what's going on with, see we got some arms, we got some bullpen arms.
I like it. Great point made by all. I did want to shout out Jamie Walker. He's talking about there's no Allure except for possibly going FBS. They are definitely more stable than the Big South, but if the MEAC isn't taking playoffs or FBS, then likely wouldn't happen. I agree with that from that perspective that they're likely not going to happen. I do think it's strange to think that going to a FCS conference is going to put you in position to go FBS. I do not have an understanding of what that means. I think that's a fallacy out there that people are put in the ether. To go FBS has nothing to do with conference affiliation. Very small. It is about doing what's necessary for your institution in terms of infrastructure, facilities, support from your alumni, and growing your revenue base. That has nothing to do with what conference affiliation you are to do that. And whoever has told you that has lied to your face. Now, I'm here to tell you, somebody that studies this, that how you make a move to FBS is about what you do for your institution independently to prepare yourself to next time the conference churning takes place and you're prepared to get to a conference that's FBS is when they come and look at your institution, you can show what your institution has done to be prepared to make an FBS move. James Madison, Sam Houston State, Jacksonville State, quietly, some of them not so quietly, over at least the last 10 years have been working on their infrastructure, their support from their alumni base, their corporate donor giving, as well as facility enhancement to be prepared for opportunity to go FBS. Do not be fooled, people. Conference affiliation will not do that for you, period. With that being said, I'll close it out on that note because I would be remiss as a professor of sport management in the business
You dropped about
sport if
Shaw.
I did not give you true information about what it looks like to understand sport business. Let's stop being deceitful to individuals that do not know what it means to understand the business of sport. Thank you for listening to Inside the HBCU Sports Lab. Make sure you share our podcast with your friends and colleagues. I am Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, the Dean of HBCU Sports, coming from inside the lab in the College of Sports with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop. Again, we want to thank you for listening to Dr. Bill's Inside the HBCU Sports Lab with Mike Washington and Charles Bishop every Tuesday and Thursday. Check out the baseball games, basketball games, and all the new information and news. Go check out that podcast so you can get more than just what we told you today. Follow me, Dr. Kenyatta Cavil, on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Inside HBCU Sports Lab 1 on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube on Inside HBCU Sports Lab. Download my JBN, my BCSN. Continue to check us out. Stick with us. We're going to make sure that you're going to get legitimate information about the business of sport. Check out Brian and AD in terms of what they do on the Sports Wrap. Again, prayers to Brian and his family. Whatever we can do to support him and be strong, we're going to be there. Shout out for those that support us. Thank you, Lab listeners, for getting in here and mix it up with us this week. Dream big and continue to move forward. We will talk with you soon. Charles.
Of course.
Drew.
Shout out to my boy Brian. We uplifting you, brother. Lecture.
Dismiss. Let's see.